back to the Hearthstone Global Games. We have one final game coming up today. It's going to be the Russian Federation versus Kazakhstan to round out the day. Russian Federation, well known as one of the most powerful countries within Hearthstone. Kazakhstan was the last place finish last year in the Hearthstone Global Games. The only team to go 0-5. However, they're 1-1 now. This could be Kazakhstan's big chance to redeem themselves.
I mean, they've already done better than they did last year by winning a series. They can't do any worse. But yes, like you said, this will be a big time for them to turn themselves around. But Kazakhstan is one of those interesting countries when it comes to Hearthstone in that they are basically known for one player.
Yep.
You do get those countries where it's like Romania with RDU.
Israel with Glacier.
Exactly. They have one star player, as we are going to take a look at the players who are making up these teams. But while, you know, Neyman is a very strong player in his own right, definitely the star performer, I think we've seen some decent stuff from the other members of Kazakhstan. Whereas on the other side, in the Russian Federation, obviously some of these players need absolutely no introduction at all. Silvername, I think, is still the single player who gets the most insane reaction from chat whenever he plays. Like, it's just a wall of pukage. Yep. I don't know what pukage means, but it's all you see.
Pukage. Well, back in the day when Lorinda and I were starting out and we used to do a lot of these little online cups, occasionally Silvername would participate, and literally, the moment he's on screen, we get like 5,000 extra viewers or something absurd like that. Silvername has a big following behind him.
He does indeed, but then in terms of Hearthstone prowess, tournament pedigree, doesn't come a lot better than Stan Udachi after obviously his very strong performance way a long time ago, it feels like last year, in last year's HGT, up to his respectable performance at the World Championships, but obviously not getting quite far enough, as we are going to take a look at the bans, speaking of this specific series. And there's a couple of interesting brings in this tournament, in this series, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see some interesting bans.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter being banned straight away isn't something that's too common. Russian Federation picked Rogue as their second pick. Is there a specific reason for that?
It's a Quest Rogue.
It's a Quest Rogue. That would be a specific reason for
That's
that,
very much the reason why, as we see a lot of slower versions of decks from Kazakhstan. We see, what, Elemental Mage as one of their choices here. But then again, it does get much more aggressive in some of the other decks with a Murloc Paladin. Not even the odd Paladin, although that does get panned away a little bit later on. So it's quite clear from the Russian Federation they're just getting rid of a good deck with the Druid, and they're just trying to ban away some of the more aggressive decks to make room for their Quest Rogue.
Rewind a little bit, though.
Yep.
Murloc Mage?
No, Murloc Paladin.
Sorry, Elemental Mage?
Elemental Mage. It looks like a pretty cool deck. Like, they got Bonfire Elemental in there.
Is it Leyline Manipulator and Antonidas and things?
I'll check for you.
Thank you.
It's not. I mean, it does run Leyline Manipulator, because it's a decent card, but it's not an OTK variant. It's just a curve deck that runs up to Frostlich Jaina. It's a very cool looking deck.
It's going to be coming up as well, game number 2. Game number 1 is going to be Priest for Kazakhstan, Mage for Russian Federation, and then we flip them over. Although, as you said, it's Elemental Mage, so honestly, I don't know what to expect from that. I'm guessing both priests are just the regular Mind Blast priest.
You guess incorrectly.
No, are you kidding me?
Kazakhstan's lineup is really weird, okay? They've got what's basically Breakfast Priest, if you remember from back in the day.
Breakfast Priest?
Oh, no, wait, it's not Breakfast Priest, because Breakfast Priest had, well...
This is a rollercoaster of emotions.
There'd be plenty of eggs in that deck. There's both Swamp Dragon Egg and the Devil Saw Egg in there, but it's not running the Divine Spirit in a fire package. It's instead, as I take a look at it, just a curvy deck. It runs Fungal Mancer, it runs Mad Hatter, if you need any more indication as to how much of a crazy deck this is.
Yep. Mad Hatter, isn't that card just terrible?
No, it's not. If you lock down board control, it's a 4-mana 3, it's like a 4-mana 6/5.
Okay.
But not really, but kind of better than that, but kind of worse.
That is a very succinct description as we get in to game number 1. Breakfast-ish Egg Priest versus... all right, all of my notes are going out.
We should go with Egg Priest. I think Egg Priest is slightly better than Breakfast Priest.
I don't know the matchups here, Derek. I'm going to be completely honest with that. I would have to expect the Priest to be quite aggressive, and therefore... if it can take the board nice and early, then...
You expect correctly, my friend.
Should be pretty good against the Mage, in theory.
Yeah, I mean, the things that would hurt it in this matchup is it's clearly going for a very aggressive game plan. It's got Mind Blast in there, which is going to be very bad in this matchup because it does give itself the ability to extend into the later game because it runs Shadow Reaper Anduin and the Mind Blast in it as well. It's such a weird deck. But the things that are working in its favor is it has a whole bunch of very strong early game cards. Northshire Cleric, Shadow Ascendant, Radiant Elemental, Duskbreaker as well in particular are some of the key powerhouses in this matchup.
Belgium just taking their second win against Hong Kong in the off-stream match there. What's going on in the background? Their score is currently 1-1 in the Swiss.
Right. Did you see Chinoy's of Belgium's tweet just before they went live?
I did not. No.
He was taking a picture of himself with a flag in front of him, and it looked as if he was not wearing a shirt, and he said if they lost, he would drop it. And then obviously all his Belgian fans were cheering for Belgium to lose then at that point.
You are the shadow.
But talking about this particular game, which is the Russian Federation and Kazakhstan, looking as we kind of predicted, Limonidic on the Priest, getting off to a very nice start indeed. Nice, aggressive start, pretty much the perfect curve you're looking for when you're running a Shadow Ascendant as well.
That being said, though, Russian Federation do have the hand that they need to come back from this board state.
This is absolutely nuts.
The fact they've got Frostbolt into Cinderstorm, that just looks absurd.
Yep, that looks pretty good to me indeed. Or even Frostbolt Arcane Missiles ping, because then the extra ping you're getting and you can choose exactly where you're targeting it does feel like it's pretty strong to me indeed. They just need to make sure they hit a couple of these missiles through to minions. They hit perfectly and end up in a scenario now where they're able to swing back board control pretty decisively in their favor. But having said that again, man, this Egg Priest is so cool. What are the next few turns going to be? It's going to be Egg into Mirage Caller into Fungal Mancer, double buff on the Egg.
Oh my god.
That is actually Breakfast Priest at that point, because you've got Fungal Mancer, which is like mushrooms, and then you've got eggs and mushrooms. This is turning into like full English Priest. We just need like Sausage Mancer.
We have the full English caster lineup, so I think we can definitely call it full English Priest. Well, how does Fox deal with this little egg dilemma that we have at the moment? Because he could just trade into it and then Cinderstorm and try and hit the dinosaur, maybe play Glacier Shard first.
That feels very optimistic indeed.
Raven, okay, with Death Rattle Hunter, Raven was big advocate for always dealing with eggs. Like, you cannot leave an egg alive.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that wholeheartedly, but this is a completely different matchup. Like, the things that Priest will do with this egg is they will buff it, but they will also buff a 5/5. Like, it's not the fact that it relies on there being a Death Rattle minion on the board. What Priest wants here is for any minion at all to be on the board, so that they can buff it up with Fungal Mancer or the Cobalt Scalebane.
I'm just staring at this deck list in astonishment right now. And don't forget, if you're watching back home and you'd like to see the deck list, there is an exclamation mark deck list command that you can use. There was some community show yesterday, and you can look at every deck list of the tournament, just like we do.
A very good reminder. As Russian Federation pick up the perfect answer to both the egg and the Devil Saw that comes out of it. And Kazakhstan now are in a position where they were looking great on the last turn, as I highlighted, Mirage Caller into Fungal Mancer. But now what do? Just play an Acolyte of Pain? Feels awful because it gets value traded. Do you just play a Mirage Caller here because it's a 2/3?
They might have to. That last play has completely shut them down. Just looking at the endless possibilities that would have been available here. The Mirage Caller into the Fungal Mancer, like you said. The Elixir would have been great just to buff up an egg at any point. But the fact that there's no egg there now is really not good.
Did you just call it Alexa?
Did I? Elixir.
Yeah,
my apologies.
Hey Alexa, buff my Fungal Mancer.
Should do it too.
Real.
And Kazakhstan do indeed conclude they have to take a very sad-looking play of just throwing down the Mirage Caller just to start contesting this board, because all of their reactive options, as I pointed out, basically just the Duskbreaker have not come into play, so they need to make these proactive plays. But just turn after turn here, Fox and the Russian Federation has found ways to completely shut down everything that the Priest has been throwing down. But finally, a little bit of RNG goes in Kazakhstan's favor.
Yeah, now that the Mirage Caller gets to survive, Kazakhstan can either value trade that into the 3/2, they could buff it up with the Elixir and trade it into the Mana Worm. There's actually a few potential plays. Cobalt Scalebane would be good to allow for some better trades next turn, though that does then give Fox the potential to use spells to deal with everything.
Right.
Also, pinging the Imani Berserker and then trading that into the Cobalt Scalebane looks good for Fox here. So,
I hate to put you on the spot here as well.
Okay.
Do you know which elixir that is?
no.
Yeah.
Elixir of Purification.
Alexa, what's that elixir?
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you.
Not as on it with my Mauls as I am with my elixirs. Or other way around. Scratch that, reverse it. But here for Kazakhstan, they really just need to find any way they can to make the biggest plays onto the board, make the biggest value trades they can, because their reactive options are very poor indeed. So they just need
Divine
to be
Shield.
making sure, as we see it is Divine
Divine
Shield.
Shield.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's a pretty good option there, and it makes sense that they're going for it, because again, they just need to make sure that they are definitively seizing board control.
Yeah. No, Grant, given that it's the Divine Shield, that is clearly one of the better plays that turn. Having to trade into the Imani Berserker, unfortunately, again, to prevent the ping and the trade there. And now with the second Cinderstorm pickup. Cinderstorm is a very good Hearthstone card, Derek.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's great.
No, I think it's fine in this deck. Cinderstorm is objectively not a very good Hearthstone card.
Okay, sure.
Like,
sure.
in terms of what it does for the mana cost, it's just not actually that good.
Right, but you'd run more Arcane Missiles if you could, I guess.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I'd run more Mana Worms if I could, but yeah. It's fine, and it's pretty good in this scenario, just as a way to help even up the trades, launch more damage through to face, obviously. But taking an actual closer look at Kazakhstan's previous turn, as wow, that Cinderstorm did much more what it was supposed to do than the previous.
Told you it's a good card. Like, what else do you want?
I mean, what was it? That was basically just a Shadow Bolt that did 1 damage to the opponent. That's fine. It's not that good, though.
It's better than Shadow Bolt.
Time runs out on
Shadow Bolt's not that good. But in this scenario, for Leonidic on the Priest there, he decided not to go for Scalebait and instead played the Elixir, which left him a 4/4 on board and 2 extra health, whereas he could have value traded into the Sorcerer's Apprentice with his 2/2 that he had on board, and then just played the Scalebait, which would have left him obviously with 2 less health, but with a 5/5 on board, which is a pretty big difference against a board like that, because clearly the 4/4 just got munched there.
Yeah, Kazakhstan, I guess, played the egg, hoping for an explosive rune,
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, it's the easiest, cheapest way of getting a 5/5 on the board. Unfortunately...
If that did happen, though, they'd basically just be dead, though, because they'd have taken even more damage.
That's true, yeah.
I mean, there is no way for them to really pull back the game in this scenario. It has to be Duskbreaker off the top, which, okay, now that I actually look at it a little bit closer, now it makes sense to me why they didn't play the Scalebane, because they have realized we pretty much have to hit Duskbreaker off the top to be able to pull things back, and obviously the Scalebane is the only dragon in their hand.
It all comes back to that key turn with the egg, though, right? Like the cracking the egg, fireballing the 5/5 that came out of it. If not for that turn, things would have exploded for Kazakhstan over the next few turns.
Absolutely.
But it just shut down. It just shut Kazakhstan down, and they weren't able to do anything on turn 3, or turn 4, just drop a
Right.
2/3.
And this is why, since the dawn of Hearthstone, decks that rely too heavily on buffs have been weak. Obviously, Zoo kind of relied on buff cards back in the day, but it had such fantastically sticky minions and such good minions even outside of the buffs that it was allowed to work, because you could just play Flame and play all the other crazy cards like Nerubian Egg, and it didn't matter necessarily if minions stuck because you just tapped through to more minions. Whereas in this deck, Russian Federation were able to clear off everything Kazakhstan played every turn, and Fungalmancer became useless, Elixir became kind of bad, the Mirage Caller became just a 3-mana 2/3. It was just not a powerful enough deck because everything was cleared off.
The key issue for the deck being that everything relied on the egg, or everything relied on something being on the board. But nothing ended up being on the board, and Fox now developed an egg of his own.
Yeah, I was kind of questioning as to why he bothered doing it, because a ping to the face seemed more efficient to me, but obviously a play against Duskbreaker seems like a very nice way to make sure that no matter what your opponent throws down here, you're always going to be able to close out the game on the following turn.
I must consider.
Mushroom power!
I don't believe there's anything in this deck that will allow Kazakhstan to get back into this game.
Yeah, I mean, they can keep themselves alive at, what, 2 health in this scenario? And then play Shadow Reaper Anduin on the following turn. Like, they are starting to wrestle back board control here, but it's such a little amount that Russian Federation are going to need to pull this back.
Yeah, if they're playing Shadow Reaper Anduin next turn, they're never surviving that Pyroblast. There's no, at least I believe, there are no healing spells in the deck apart from the Elixir that gives them lifesteal.
Swamp Dragon Egg being thrown down, utilizing the coin in addition with that. I mean, I guess that the coin could be good with Shadow Reaper Anduin to maybe lock down the board control. As with Arcane Missiles, one of those needs to go phase to close out the game because of the Mana Worm buff.
Yep, there we go. First one does the job. 2 of them, in fact, going face there, allowing the Russian Federation to take their first win against one of the stranger decks of Kazakhstan's lineup, but they're about to go up against another strange deck in Kazakhstan's lineup, as it's now going to be the Russian Federation on the Mage versus, no, sorry, on the Priest.
Yes.
Versus Kazakhstan on the Elemental.
That's right, the Elemental Mage, which is going to be another interesting one. But like you said, for Kazakhstan, a very cool deck they brought there, and I love to see inventive deck building happening. We are obviously going to see that more and more as the weeks progress in the global games, because next time we're back in a couple of weeks' time, the Boomsday Project will be live, and all kinds of nonsense will occur. I don't even want to think about what's going to happen then.
Kazakhstan is just really, like, the only team in the whole Hearthstone Global Games bored of the current meta already. Like, do you know what? Let's mix it up a week early, before anyone else knows, and let's just do our own thing. I kind of want them to win, just so we can interview them.
Yeah.
But let's take another look at what's coming up for the rest of this series. As I said a moment ago, it's going to be Neyman on the Elemental Mage versus Stan Udachi himself on the Control Priest. Now, Derek, bring me back to reality for a second. This Control Priest is just a regular Control Priest deck, right?
It looks very much to be that way. You got Holy Fire in there, very standard. Anduin, Alexstrasza, and Ooze knocking about in there as well. Probably won't be too relevant, but pretty much just going to be the standard game plan. Make sure the Mage doesn't get too much of a dominating board. Pray they don't draw Frostlich Jaina and try and burst them down.
Yeah. Frostlich Jaina's in this Elemental. What is going on?
Well, it has to be. It's
course,
like the Elemental card.
I'm just confused by this whole deck list. It's the second of Kazakhstan's deck list in a row where I'm just sort of gazing at it and not really taking it in.
Okay, so trying to actually analyze what is most likely to happen in this game, the usual tools that you're using to win as the Control Mage up against the Control Priest are obviously Arcane Artificers to pull back your health, primarily Frostlich Jaina to heal back up, and all your removal spells, because the Priest can make a pretty dominating board if you're not careful. Okay. However, here, because this is a Book of Spectres Elemental Mage, there are very few spells even in the deck at all, and there are no Arcane Artificers, obviously, because there are very few spells to go along with it. So in terms of actual health gain, it's pretty much all in on Frostlich Jaina, but Frostlich Jaina becomes absolutely absurd with all these elementals.
And to confirm there as well, if you draw Frostlich Jaina off of the Book of Spectres, you don't have to discard it.
No, you discard spells.
It's just spells you discard, it's not non-minions. Okay, cool, because we were talking about that with weapons earlier,
yes,
I think.
It's just spells.
That one has come up again. Wow, okay, Derek, well, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had to pick a favourite for this coming game, what would you pick, the Priest or the Mage?
I'd pick the Priest. I think it's too much of a fair deck, the Elemental Mage. Like, it plays decent minions on curve, but pretty consistently in Hearthstone that's shown to not have been enough unless it's incredibly aggressive.
Okay.
Like, obviously, Murloc, whoever can do the most, or whichever class or deck can do the most powerful things in turns 1 through 3, always has a place in the meta. Be it Aggro Shaman, Murloc, Paladin, Pirate, Warrior, whatever it is at the flavor of the month, they always have a space in the meta. But just curving out with minions is generally not powerful enough because of how ridiculously powerful endgames are in Hearthstone at the moment, with the likes of Shudderwock, Blood Reaver Gul'dan, Taunt Warrior, Taunt Druid, Malagos Druid. There's so many powerful endgames that just playing out decently statted elementals cannot compete very well.
I just wanted to start to take a glance at the future games that are coming up as well. And Kazakhstan's Death Rattle Hunter is fairly standard.
Okay. Mostly
standard. There is a Stranglethorn Tiger in the deck.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
They just have to do something different, don't they? I dread to look at the Shadowwalk Shaman. We'll wait until later for that one, but who knows what could be in there as we get into game number 2. And, okay, Firefly, Nightmare Amalgam. That's not a bad start for Neyman.
Is it what you're actually looking for, though? Like, it's a bit of a trap that you fall into in some of the aggressive decks or the curve decks where you just keep Firefly because it's a 1-drop. Is it actually good for you here? Say you play it on turn 1 and they play Northshire Cleric. You're really sad because they're drawing a whole bunch of cards then. Even if they don't play anything, you're only dealing 1 damage a turn. So I think Firefly is actually not the keep here, which is why I love from Kazakhstan getting rid of that, looking for some of the more impactful cards, which isn't necessarily just Frostlich Jaina. It's just some of the more impactful mid-game cards. I'm obviously talking about stuff like Steam Surger, Bonfire Elemental, Servant of Kalamos. Man, this is really bringing back the good old Ongoro days. Huh?
So Neyman does run 2 copies of Mana Worm.
Yes.
And he also runs Book of Spectres, he runs the Spellstones that we saw earlier, he runs 2 copies of that, and he runs Glyph, obviously. He has Glyph in his hand. So there are some spells in here, okay.
Yeah.
Runs out on me.
Obviously, Archmage Arugel knocking about in there as well, which I think has kind of been dropped from even the Murloc mages that play Book of Spectres.
Oh, right. It did take me a couple of seconds to realize what that card is. There's 2 mana legendary, right.
Yeah, Archmage Arugel, obviously, whenever you draw a minion, you add another copy of it to your hand.
Great combo with the Book of Spectres.
Absolutely.
Though it does fill up your hand incredibly quickly.
As now the options available, Polymorph's looking pretty good to me here. Obviously, Molten Reflections, if you can hit it on something very large indeed, could be very powerful. But there's not actually that many big minions in the deck. It's basically Lich King and Blazecaller are kind of the absolute top end that you're looking at. For Kazakhstan, just trying to curve out really as best as possible. This is a curve deck in the absolute truest sense. Running a very nice, smooth arena curve with a few 1-drops, lots of 2s and 3s.
But Russian Federation are actually curving out a little bit better than Neyman, or at least at the start of the game.
Yep.
Going to utilize that Pyromancer to just try and make a good trade later on, as I guess its ability isn't as valuable here. It's not a deck full of 1/1s, it's a deck full of minions that have 2, 3, 4, 5 health.
And you've got some really nice plays available to Standard actually on the following turn. After Tar Creeper or Nightmare Amalgam comes down, we could see Power Word Shield into Heal Up on this turn. Obviously, it would have been even better for Russian Federation if the Nightmare Amalgam had come down, because obviously Kazakhstan realize a spell plus the 3 attack from Pyromancer is a little bit too scary. You don't want to give them the possibility to trade up into that minion. So I love the play of the Tar Creeper here instead.
Yeah, and it does make things particularly awkward for Stanadatchi. He could coin out a Twilight Drake, but that means damaging his own minions, putting the Pyromancer into ping range. There's not much else to do though. Powered Shield. I guess Powered Shield draw a card. How urgently do you think the Russian Federation want to draw through their deck? They've already drawn Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Yeah, not particularly. Yeah. It's just still a pretty good thing to do. Like, you can Powered Shield on the Pyromancer and then heal it up again, or heal up the Cleric actually, so it can't die to an attack and a ping.
Okay. Just ending the turn with, I guess, the most powerful board possible without using up the coin.
Yeah, just thinking why they didn't go for the heal on the Cleric, because obviously it would require 2 mana from their opponent to kill off the Cleric, so maybe Stanadatchi is just saying, I'm fine with that, I'm very happy to allow you to kill off my Cleric because it costs you 2 extra mana. And he wants to make sure he has, as you said, the most dominating board presence with a nice big 3/4. But I was expecting the heal on the Cleric there instead, I have to be honest. Get both your minions at 3 health. It's not like you're vulnerable to Duskbreaker or anything from your opponent. 2 3 health minions is pretty good. It does, however, I suppose, allow the value trade into the Tar Creeper, but obviously he doesn't even want to do that because he doesn't want to give it the 3 attack power on your turn. You'd rather wait for it to trade in on your opponent's turn. So I think with the way this has worked out, it would have been a bit better to heal the Cleric.
It's one of those games where Tar Creeper is really at its strongest. It's just preventing really anything from happening on the board while Kazakhstan continue to draw their threats and hopefully curve out a little bit more. The problem is the Tar Creeper is not actually protecting anything that valuable. Kazakhstan's strategy, as you said, is to just curve out as well as they can. And if part of that curving out means playing a 3-mana 1/5, then maybe it's not as ideal as I was just saying. That's come in handy.
Yep, Kazakhstan, as you said, just playing the best things that they can every single turn. And as they start to lose value from this hand, we could see a very cool combo of Greater Amethyst spell, Greater Ruby Spellstone on the following turn, and then Leyline Manipulator to reduce the cost of all them juicy spells that they've added to the hand.
So it's not fully upgraded yet?
No, it's regular.
Yeah. But yeah, with the Firefly then, that will be a possibility over the next few turns, and that seems pretty big. Dustbreaker seems pretty big also. It's a little bit awkward. Does mean the Pyromancer gets finished off as well. I don't think Russian Federation can even save it. It's Pyromancer can't coin out the heal because of the coin, then the Pyromancer would be destroyed. So Pyromancer is probably just trading into...
Well, I mean, you could save it if you wanted to. You go coin first, heal Duskbreaker, which would leave you with a 3-1.
Sure.
And you've cleared your opponent's board, which is obviously worth considering here.
That's true.
Gives you a very nice board clear. But then you're thinking, why have I done that when I could have developed, what, like a 4-8 here with...
second Twilight
the Twilight Drake instead, which feels very strong to me indeed. You have seen a polymorph off of a glyph. There's not really much hard removal in the deck outside of that, to be honest.
Is there even a Black Knight or some minion version? No, there isn't. There's just Blaze Caller is about as close as it gets, and there's only one copy. So yeah, I mean, on that logic, just developing the Twilight Drake seems pretty good. He's going to go with the Dustbreaker and clear the entire board instead, hold back that coin for a little bit later on. And I guess that we're going to be pausing this game. It looks like, yeah, we're going to be pausing this game for a second, but again, thanks to the new wonderful disconnect features that Hearthstone has, hopefully we will just resume the game as it was if the players, whoever's disconnected, comes back quickly enough.
Yeah, and it does look to me like Russia will be very happy that they're not having to restart that game. They were in a very nice spot there indeed. They had not been run over in the slightest by any kind of mana Worm Firefly game at the start or a nice clean curve. It was just a very fair game at the start for the Mage, which kind of feels like the name of the deck at the moment. Like, it's just been very, very standard play, nothing all too broken so far, which cannot compete against cards like Dustbreaker, Psychic Scream, and Shadow Reaper Anduin. They are, in their own, objectively too powerful.
Fair Mage, is that what we call it now?
Sure, why not?
Fair Mage. The issue is that this is Dustbreaker at its strongest, right? Just against these minions that don't have that much health, clearing an entire board, plonking this 3-3 down, removing any of the tempo advantage their opponent has had, put themselves on the board and get ready for preemptively prepare for a trade next turn. It's just Dustbreaker being Dustbreaker. It's a very premium Hearthstone card.
It is indeed, and the line of play that they went for, where they just cleared off everything, saved back the coin, it obviously gives them a very good amount of flexibility, because the coin, especially with Shadow Reaper Anduin in hand, always allows you to do some pretty crazy stuff to fight back the board if you do start losing it. And it also means you are clearing on one turn and then playing your powerful minion in the Twilight Drake on the following turn, which is always pretty good Hearthstone play. You want to play your big minions when they're not being traded into so that you can take the trades you want to.
Just glancing at my side monitors here, it looks like we're still waiting for one of the players to disconnect. And again, just for anyone that didn't know, this used to be an issue in the past. It used to be a bigger issue than it was now, because Hearthstone, unfortunately, does rely on technology, which does rely on players' internet connections, etc. Things can go wrong. In the past, it would be just like when you disconnect on the ladder, you probably end up losing the game, or the game ends and we have to start again. But now, because of an amazing patch that came in towards the end of last year, during a friendly match, if a player disconnects, a timer appears on the screen and they get so long to come back to the game, and the game state just gets paused until then. So hopefully, by the time I finished explaining all of this, I'm literally just buying time right now and saying random words that pop into my head. But when I'm finished doing all of that, which will be very soon, in just a few moments, when I finish the sentence, which will be after another couple of minutes, okay, never mind. We're going to go to a short break. I really tried, guys. I'm so sorry. We'll be back very soon with more Russia versus Kazakhstan. So I finally finished talking, and unfortunately the conclusion is that we are going to have a regame. I guess they didn't come back in time or something. I don't know what happened there. Derek, let's just go back in time. Elemental Mage versus Control Priest. Do you have any new thoughts about this Elemental Mage deck?
Not really. It doesn't seem particularly good, in my opinion. Like, I think there's a reason that no one's really playing Elemental Mage at the highest level. It's kind of like Elemental Shaman back in the day, where it just wasn't the best version of the class that was knocking about. Like, Big Spell Mage or Aggro Mage just kind of seemed better, in my opinion. It's still a deck that relies very much on Frostlich Jane in the late game.
Yeah.
And everything it does in the early game, you know, how does that beat Wild Growth into Nourish,
Right.
into Lich King or something like that? Like you're doing stuff that's perfectly acceptable at all stages in the game, but not powerful, not really powerful. And I think that's what's going to happen against the Priest, where you're up against the likes of Duskbreaker, as we saw, Twilight Drake, the Psychic Scream as well. It's just too powerful.
I mean, it just doesn't have any of these big, really powerful cards, like the new Mage Legendary spell, for example, like Cinderstorm. There's no Cinderstorm in this deck. Of course it's not that, you know, broken.
Yeah, no terrible cards like Cinderstorm. This deck, however, with the new spell Luna's Pocket Galaxy,
Is that the Legendary spell?
yes,
Okay.
could be pretty cool. 7 mana, reduce all minions in your deck to 1 mana cost.
How have you
That would be
learned
pretty
the
absurd.
names so quickly?
I read them.
Fair enough. I like to look at the pictures myself. Which isn't much good when I'm trying to cast.
Me and Foul. Yeah.
Oh, look, the yellow one is attacking the blue one
Yeah.
with the spikes on.
I mean, you don't need to tell me that that's how you cast.
Yeah.
I know it well.
Yeah, sorry about that. Anyways, I'm looking at the screen. I just looked up, there's a disconnect.
I didn't know whether to bring it up. Russia sent another message in the client that it said, another disc.
It's pretty funny just spying on some of the messages that come up in the client. Obviously, they don't get shown on screen, but Raven and Sotter highlighted a pretty good one last week where when the admins tell the players, because they do a test game and all that boring stuff before we go live, so that when we go live, you don't have to watch them jump into spectator mode. When they do this test game, the admin messages them when they're done, and they say, "Okay, you can surrender now." They just say "surrender now," and when it's messaging it to South Korea.
Yeah.
It's very, very funny. But sounds like we need to change to a different server or something. I don't know what's going on. I don't know the behind-the-scenes stuff. But I do know that I have the joy of telling you we're going to go to another break. So we will see you very soon, hopefully, for the rest of this series. We're back with Elemental Mage versus Control Priest. It's Kazakhstan versus the Russian Federation. This is our 3rd time lucky. So I'm just gonna check before we go any further. Production team, are we ready with the next game?
We're ready with the next game.
Well, you won't have heard that, but production said in our ears, yes, we are ready for the next game.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear. And as you said, 3rd time's a charm. We're going to be able to get into this Elemental Mage from Kazakhstan, a very weird-looking deck, most certainly, with the Book of Spectres, Archmage Arugel knocking about in there as well, up against from Stan Dachi, the much more standard-looking Control Priest. And my oh my, has
better.
Payman got off to a slightly better start here.
That's better. Mana Worm, Spell, Targ Reaper. Yeah, all right.
That'll do it.
Shadowdachi's hand isn't so bad either.
Yep, very
Fragments of
respectable.
Powered
to keep
Shield,
along
just
with.
great combination.
Obviously, not being on the coin, it limits the amount of actual disgusting possibilities you can make happen with the Wild Pyromancer, because there aren't that many really, really cheap spells in this deck. Like, obviously, if you're not reducing their cost with Radiant Elemental, in the early stages of the game, Mind Blast, Shadow Visions, and the Divine Hymn can be a little bit expensive to clear off multiple 3-health minions.
Steam Surger picked up as well there, though, so Neyman has a pretty nice curve if he just wants to go ahead and play that out. But Hong Kong have just taken down Belgium.
That's exactly right.
3-2.
Bit of an unfortunate loss there for Belgium, as they are one of the teams I was very strongly considering making my pick.
But on the plus side, Chinoy's.
He did actually just tweet, and I mean, I don't know what we were expecting, but it was less spicy than one might hope.
Okay.
For those of you who are wondering, he tweeted out beforehand a picture of him with a flag covering him, and if they lost, he would post a picture without the flag, and it was not very spicy.
Turns out he was wearing clothes, so
Yeah.
anyways, so coining out one of these 3 drops would allow this Mana Worm to trade. I'm not sure that's exactly what Neyman wants to do, but however, going 3 into Steam Surger and beyond does look like a pretty good curve here.
I mean, just anything that really dominates the early board and does not make you vulnerable to Duskbreaker seems like a fantastic play to me. Like you said, curving Elemental into the Steam Surger to get a Flame Geyser as well. It's a very nice way to get this early board rolling, because now that the Wild Pyromancer has been dealt with, Russian Federation don't actually have all that much to do in these early turns because of the fact that Kazakhstan and Naiman have so perfectly positioned their cards to play around Duskbreaker.
Right, Duskbreaker just dealing damage to all of the minions doesn't make much of a difference when the Amalgam will just then straight trade into it anyway. So Standard actually going to have to fall back onto the Twilight Drake by the looks of things.
This is definitely the right play. Like Duskbreaker, you could have thrown down just to damage some of the minions. If it killed off the Nightmare Amalgam and then just straight traded with the Tar Creeper, I think that would be fine. But in this scenario, even though you're giving up the Dragon in hand for Duskbreaker, it's quite obvious from Kazakhstan's play, trading away the Mana Worm, they're not going to make themselves vulnerable to Duskbreaker anytime soon.
Divine Hymn, just another one of these cards that's not going to do all that much for Standard actually. It doesn't even have a dragon in hand now. Not that the Duskbreaker would do much this turn regardless, right? Like, now he does draw a dragon, we can see the Duskbreaker's going yellow, but probably just has to play that dragon out.
So he's obviously thinking about leading up into the next few turns, how do I actually get this board back? And more importantly, how do I win this game? If I'm taking 9 damage every single turn, can I afford to take the time to wrestle this board back just with minion trades? If he plays Twilight Drake here, not expecting to go for Psychic Scream, does he ever pull this back? But I guess with this line of play, he's thinking, I try to load up onto the board as much as possible. If I can win back the board without playing Psychic Scream, brilliant, I take that opportunity. And there's a fallback plan to, if this spirals out of control and there's something like Bonfire Elemental on this turn, or Servant of Kalamos that completely spirals board control in Kazakhstan's favor, you've still got the Psychic Scream to wrestle things back.
So long-term, things probably not a disaster for the Russian Federation at the moment. In the meantime, Kazakhstan can't push. They can push some damage, but it's not really enough for the Russian Federation to be threatened about at the moment. The problem is, unlike Aggro Mage, there's just no burn in this deck.
Yeah, that is exactly right. But I don't think that's that much of a tragedy. Tragedy. This I make up.
Good word.
Word
That's
there.
a Lorinda word or a Gaskin word.
A travesty or a tragedy. Take your pick there. It's not that bad for Naiman here that they don't have too much burst in the immediate. Obviously, moving on later in the game, you'd like to get those burn spells rolling. But anything that really cements the board control here is a very, very strong card indeed. Just keeps them from not being vulnerable to Duskbreaker by playing these high health minions turn after turn.
Oh, this board's getting wider and wider. Now, if a dragon is drawn, that Duskbreaker is actually looking pretty good. Very good, in fact.
This leaves them very vulnerable to a Duskbreaker as they
about Shadow Priest.
are just carrying on pretty much straight up with the board control plan here.
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect to see Naiman trade as much as he did there, but there you go, and the Shadow Priest is certainly the punish. Now what does Naiman do?
And this is very interesting because I was going to bring up the fact that in my initial look at this match and my analysis of how it might have worked out, I was anticipating that the Control Mage, or sorry, the Elemental Mage, simply doesn't have enough heal to out-heal the Priest. They will just be doing too much damage through Anduin, Mind Blast, and Alexstrasza. But then in the start of this game, I was saying, oh, that's not the game plan. They just win through aggression. They curve out, kill the opponent, damage doesn't matter from the Priest because they just need to stabilize. But now Naiman's game plan is suggesting to me he does want to take it into the later stages of the game. He does not want to go all face. He wants to try and seize back board control in his favor.
He's going to hope to draw some of the tools that allow him to do that right now. It's sort of the final chance to get onto the board before the Priest completely takes over. Having to discard a Primordial Glyph isn't ideal either.
I don't know if this is necessarily your final chance to develop onto the board, because if you actually look at what the Priest has available to them, obviously powerful board clear options in the Duskbreaker and the Psychic Scream, but nothing to really capitalize on that.
That's true.
Like, they've played both Twilight Drakes here. They don't have a Primordial Drake. They don't really have any big minions to really push Mage out of the game. And Naiman obviously has a near unlimited source of very powerful minions to come down.
Cleric, a very big draw though,
Yes,
allowing the Russian Federation to draw a lot of the tools in their deck there. 2 more cards now thanks to the Divine Hymn, and now hopefully there'll be a dragon drawn activating the Duskbreaker in hand. Maybe not, but Scaleworm will be very helpful in making one of these value trades.
Absolutely, perfectly good enough here for Russian Federation on their side, because at this point, now that they have seized board control and can capitalize on that, as I mentioned, being the key difference here with the likes of Scaleworm, as soon as they find something like Anduin, it's just going to be too much for Kazakhstan to really fight back against in a timely fashion, as they get a pretty dire selection of spells.
8 mana, do nothing. 8 mana, do nothing.
Yeah.
As there are no secrets in the deck. I guess the secrets are okay, just based off the fact that Russian Federation won't have any idea which secrets they are. They are random secrets after all, and we'll have to play around everything.
Yeah.
Spellbender does tend to be the most difficult one to play around.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the only secret left that doesn't have the same activator as another one of the secrets, as you obviously got Explosive Runes, Mirror Entity, and Frozen Clone on player minion. Attack Face triggers both Vaporize and Ice Barrier. Whereas if you're just playing a spell, I suppose Spellbender could activate on the same one as Counterspell. As you said, it can be difficult for the priest to figure out which one that is.
It's just more difficult because it's more difficult to pocket because there aren't as many spells that target as there are just spells overall. And there we go. There's the dragon that activates the Dustbreaker, but it's just going to come straight down now by the looks of things, with the Cabal Shadow Priest being able to finish up the Water Elemental quite nicely. I guess Frostledge Jaina is still something that Russian Federation have to kind of be afraid of, but it's going to be very difficult for Neyman to win this.
And I don't think you actually even have to trade into the Water Elemental. I think you can just throw everything face here, because you know that it's a very unreactive deck from your opponent. They don't have heal, and I love this from Stanudachi, even though it looked like, as you said, you know, it's a good trade here. You're clearing off something from the mage, but why would you have to? You can have an even better trade with the Primordial Drake, and this is just innately an incredibly unreactive deck.
Yeah.
Kazakhstan just rely on curving out and keeping board control, which they have not done.
Neyman is thinking, Glacial Mysteries. Do I play that? I have 8 mana. Do I play that card? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that's probably just you thinking that one.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. However, double Secret plus Ping is an option, I guess. Even if Vaporize just deals with the Cabal Shadow Priest, it's doing something.
Yeah, I guess it can make your opponent play a little bit weird, maybe, because they are going to be afraid of Vaporize.
Primordial Drake just does so much work here at dominating the board.
But even then, I suppose the one saving grace here for Kazakhstan is that Russian Federation have not found their own win condition yet. They do not have Alexstrasza, they do not have Anduin, so they cannot really move towards any kind of burst lethal, which gives Neyman the time to find that Frostlit Jaina that you mentioned, which will be able to gain them truly absurd amounts of lifesteal. Like, pretty much every minion in this deck is an elemental.
These Scale Worms are just insane here, though. One just goes straight into the Tar Creeper. And you know, Tar Creeper made sense to be played that turn because none of the minions on the board can kill it in one hit, but this thing can.
Scaleworm can indeed. It's interesting that this has been mostly phased out, because I remember when I first started seeing this deck really take off, like I think Zetalot was the person who first popularized the original idea for Mind Blast Priest. I think that was even before the Witchwood came out. But I think Theo, for me, was the main player I saw taking this to the super high ranks, playing at a very high level in the Mind Blast Control Priest. And he was playing double Scaleworm right at the start, but then it kind of got optimized, and I'm using quotation marks here, because, you know, it's not objectively better or worse to take out the Scaleworms, but it just got taken out for more consistent combo activators, I found.
Belarus versus Ukraine have begun their game now, Ukraine being one of Gaskin's picks.
Right, and 2-0.
They are, yeah.
Ukraine probably expected to do very well after their incredibly good performance last year.
Second place.
Exactly, almost taking down the entire thing. Whereas Belarus, a bit of a surprise, strong team here, doing much better than I think anyone would have anticipated.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. We will see the result of that game a little bit later on today, but I would expect Ukraine to take that one down.
Yes.
As Neyman actually has one of the most powerful cards in his deck, he's going to play it immediately, the Blaze Crawler. It does allow the trade into the Primordial Drake. And now his board is a little bit more difficult to deal with.
That's true.
Sort of.
Was a little bit more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, the Twilight's Acolyte and the Scaleworm together can do some serious damage. And Scaleworm in hand, I mean, obviously, in addition to the Scaleworm on the board.
But it is a good point you bring up, or kind of the essence of it, in that Stanu is actually still keeping board control, doing a fantastic job here
Yeah.
of making sure he stays ahead. But that that won't necessarily last forever, because pretty much every other card in his hand here is bad. Double Mind Blast doesn't do anything until he's delivering lethal or he finds Anduin, and Double Psychic Scream does nothing until he's behind on board.
My issue with this is that, like, even if Kazakhstan draw Jaina now,
Right.
how do they win the game? Like, they've still got a handful of, apart from Pyros, they've got a handful of nothing. It's like, best case, they draw 3 cards.
I mean,
then
best case, they get Spellstone or Glyph into Flame Strike. That's really what they need here to actually seize this back in any kind of a real way.
But Book of Spectres into 3 powerful minions is the only real way after Jaina gets played. I can see them doing anything. But Fundamental, one of the better cards, obviously. 5 and a 5/5 draw a card. It's very powerful. And there's a Glyph.
There's the Glyph, obviously unable to play a Flame Strike now if you were to find it, or even a Blizzard on this turn. Like, what are you going to do immediately if you play that? Because obviously you're facing down lethal on this turn, so it's going to have to be something like Frost Nova, Cone of Cold, Frostbolt, Fireball. There's a lot of options. Meteor 1 mana too expensive to be played.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Fireball on the 6/4. Yeah, Fireball on the 6/4 really has to be the option here.
Even Dragon's Fury would have been no good that turn because there are no big spells in the deck.
That's a good point.
This is certainly not big spell mage.
No, this is no spell mage.
Few spell mages. Neymar gives it up outright too, as finally, second time in, Shanadachi does get the win against this deck. And again, it didn't really look like it was too difficult. It's hard to see how the mage can stand up against that priest.
Yeah, it is indeed. They gave it a pretty good shot, though, and it was not a bad hand at all from the mage to be moving along with.
That's
they had Mana Worm, they had Tar Creeper into Nightmare Amalgam, very strong starting hand to be moving along with, but the priest had a pretty good starting hand. Cleric just did cleric things, drew them a whole bunch of cards from their deck. And at that point, Priest did what Priest does best. You have high health minions on the board, you heal them up, and you do not lose board control.
All right, now Kazakhstan are losing the series 0-2. And next up is going to be their Death Rattle Hunter, KG on the Death Rattle Hunter versus Renman on the Quest Rogue. That's a game to look forward to. I definitely have not seen this matchup many times before.
Yeah, this is not one you are expecting to run into, as Quest Rogue is kind of having whisperings of still being a decent deck. Like, obviously, we see, I think, who was it? Killin' All Day recently tweeting out that he did pretty well with the deck, and then Teray doing very well at HCT Oakland, I believe it was.
Yeah,
with
that's
the
right.
Quest Rogue in his lineup, yeah. So, you know, there's still people bringing the deck, doing well in good tournaments, but, I mean, that's Killin' All Day and Teray you're talking about. Those are 2 of the best Quest Rogue players in the entire world.
I mean, winning a tour stop is a pretty big deal. So it is kind of difficult to argue against that. You can argue that it was just a very good meta call for that tournament.
Sure.
There's a lot of control, not that much aggro going around. The 4/4s certainly aren't as strong as 5/5s. The nerf did hit the deck pretty hard as we see the players getting ready to begin what could be a pretty difficult matchup on both sides, I would say, because again, the Hunter is explosive, but it's not explosive quickly. And you know, say they've summoned a 5/5 on turn 4 and gets frozen. It's not really going to kill the Rogue too fast.
That's right. You're vulnerable to a lot of the tools that Rogue has available to them, because if you go cube on a 5/5 or something and you get sapped or vanished or something like that, there's a lot of ways that the Rogue can pull things back in their favor, and then once the quest has been completed, it's far from over, but they put themselves in a very strong position, especially if that copy of Valera the Hollow can come down and pretty much cement things in your favor. But I think the main thing to take away here is that although traditionally Quest Rogue has been incredibly weak to all kinds of hunters, this is very different to any kind of hunter we've seen before. It doesn't run Eagle Hornbow, it doesn't run Kill Command, it doesn't even run Animal Companion for some of that burst damage. Like, it's a lot less aggressive in terms of explosive burst damage.
That's not to say it's a control deck by any stretch of the imagination. However, Death Rattles are very weak to vanish. Like, you know, cube gets played, gets vanished, put back in the hand, you've got to play the cube again, destroy a minion again in order to get the effect. Quest Rogue does have tools capable of beating this Hunter deck. As I said before, Glacial Shard, Bounce Shards, you know, then that can stall for a few turns. If the board does get too wide, which it doesn't tend to, but if it does get too wide, then the Vanish comes in. So I definitely wouldn't want to count the Quest Rogue out here.
Right, and that's the thing. We're bigging up the Quest Rogue here and all the tools they have to work for them it's still a Hunter.
Yeah.
You still got Steady Shot to get 2 damage to face every turn. We've seen what Egg Hunter can do with these absolutely absurd plays it makes right at the start with Houndmaster, Shaw, Cube, Play Dead, Eggs, all that nonsense. The Rogue is still in for a pretty tough game unless they get a very nice early quest completion.
Yep, I just can't argue with that. How has this Rogue been teched? Let's take a quick look at the specifics. There doesn't seem to be anything additional that's defensive in there. Saps are very good against eggs and cubes. Again, as I mentioned before, the copy of the Valera the Hollow is there for later on.
Yeah, there's not really too much tech you can put in. I mean, I guess the
No.
main things back in the day was whether or not you play the Bonfire Elemental variant. I think Rage was one of the first players to take out Firefly from Quest Rogue
Oh, Igneous.
a while back. Oh, sorry, Igneous Elemental. Sorry, my mistake.
5 out of 5.
What did I say?
Rage card,
Did I say
Bonfire.
Bonfire? Oh, sorry, I meant Igneous Elemental. And Rage took out the Firefly, even, I believe, in that matchup. And some people were taking out the Wax Elementals back in the day. But basically, some of the key techs you need against Hunter are not going to be there, like Silence in particular. You're not running that in Quest Rogue.
Yeah. And you're not running silences, but you are running saps, right? So
Yes.
it sort of counteracts each other. Maybe I'm giving the Quest Rogue a little bit too much credit here, because again, take everything I'm saying with a pinch of salt. You cannot argue the fact Hunter, Quest Rogue.
Right.
Damage, no healing until the scale heights can actually do some work. But it's got the more of a chance than I think most previous Rogue would have had against most previous Hunters. However, Katharina later on in the game will do some serious work, because once that summons, a King Crush, for example, 9 damage immediately. How does the Hunter put up with that?
I think the game will probably be over one way or the other by that point.
Sure.
Like, if the Rogue is nowhere near quest completion on turn 8, and the Hunter already or doesn't have a board, it's over one way or the other pretty much definitively by that point, as KG for Kazakhstan on that Egg Hunter, even just alone with Prince Kalasev is a very nice way to get things rolling. And Renmen on the other side, not really the cards you're looking for, as I mean in the ideal scenario, he's looking for the...
Glacial Shard.
No. Why am I drawing a blank here?
Shadow Step.
Sonya, sorry. Sonya Shadow Hunter. There we go. Whew, that was a tough one. Yeah, you're looking for Sonya in combination with the Boars and the Deckhands as a way just to really rapid fire complete your quest and then start to play the Scale Hides to heal back up after all the damage you've inevitably taken.
He's certainly going to be throwing away everything other than the quest, although they are pausing and having a chat about this. I wonder, is there any consideration whatsoever to keep the Elven Minstrel?
I mean, it's a good card. Like, you want to be doing it to draw into the multiple copies of the same minion.
No coin, though. It's very difficult to... Wait.
They full keep!
No, they didn't. They didn't.
Okay.
Calm down. I thought they did as well. Like, we heard the sound and it looked like... No, this is a much better card.
Okay.
Picks up the Glacial Shard, got Firefly. Oh my goodness. That would have made no sense to me whatsoever.
But here, like you said, the Vanish can be a very important card in this matchup if they go for some kind of death rattle shenanigans with the cubes or the eggs. But outside of that, Redman really needs to be focusing on his own win condition a lot more aggressively than what his hand currently allows him to do. Obviously, he's going first. You're only starting with 4 cards, one of which is the quest itself. So his options, like, how good could his hand actually be at this point? As we start to draw a couple more cards, we're going to see how good Russian Federation's hand will be and how quickly they can complete that quest.
Yeah, Kazakhstan's hand isn't actually that aggressive. I mean, from the tracking there weren't really aggressive options whatsoever. Apart from the Kalasath, which obviously is a very powerful card. Savannah Highmane can't be played until turn 6 and is particularly susceptible to saps and vanishes and things. So I've got to say, based on the opening hands, again, I still don't want to count Renman out.
Yes, me neither, because this is the thing that against some of the not particularly powerful early game decks, Quest Rogue can just kind of win on board. Like, it doesn't happen often because their early drops are very mana inefficient, like Novice Engineer, or stat inefficient, I should say. So Novice Engineer is not particularly powerful for its stats. But if you're going for daggers, glacial shards, we could just see here from Russian Federation trying to win the board, and that's how they give themselves the time to complete the quest, because they just throw everything they can out onto the board.
KG does have the egg in hand, but no real way of activating it unless they want to play flanking strike on the egg next turn, which doesn't look very strong to me. I guess they could go with the Stitch Tracker that they took from the tracking earlier, just to try and get the Terra Scale, just to activate the egg in a couple turns. But everything Kazakhstan has seems really slow at the moment.
It does, and it's also all pretty vulnerable to Glacial Shard, which Russian Federation decided to hold on to there instead of just throwing it down, because they want to put themselves in a position where they can freeze any big singular minion, like a Devil Saw that comes out of the egg, like a Savannah Highmane, or even a Cube if that were to come down. But we see there, right in the middle, the signature twist from Kazakhstan in the Stranglethorn Tiger.
And it gets thrown away immediately, and I think that is the only copy. Yeah, that is the only copy they run. Oh, it was Stitch Tracker, sorry, I wasn't tracking, of course. So the Terra Scale Stalker does get picked up, as I expected before, as now they can activate the egg in 2 turns' time, but it's still very slow. As the second Glacial Shard gets drawn for the Russian Federation, which is going to speed things up significantly. All they need to get now is start getting shadow steps and things, or even a preparation so they can play the shards and prep out Vanish.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at as the main thing here. Double shard prep Vanish would be so absurdly powerful in this matchup, because if they go for any kind of egg nonsense, all goes back to the hand. The face gets frozen. You're completing the quest very likely on the following turn. But again, obviously, the prep is nowhere in sight for the moment.
The other thing is that if a 5/5 that comes from the egg gets returned to the hand, it then costs 5 mana, not 3. Which means that that's very weak to sap as well. It's like a freezing trap almost.
Well, at that point, it's a Stranglethorn Tiger without stealth.
Yeah.
Even worse than the card they put in the deck.
That is what that is, yeah. KG doesn't really have a straightforward way of dealing with this North Shackle. Well, they do. They can play flanking strike into it, and it looks like they're going to have to. That doesn't feel good, though.
Yeah, so clearly they're thinking, you know, wow, okay.
Oh my goodness.
I was going to say, against Quest Rogue, you obviously always want to be killing off the high priority minions that you think they want to bounce. But then the question is here, do they really want to bounce a Novice Engineer? I guess yes, but it's obviously good for them to bounce. But would they have just played it out, just expecting it to die there? I guess what can the Hunter actually do to kill it off outside of playing flanking strike?
That's true.
Maybe denies a Houndmaster Shaw being played by your opponent. But I think even then, for KG there, playing the Houndmaster Shaw could have been pretty good.
It would have had to be Houndmaster Shaw into Firefly or something in order to deal with...
Which doesn't exist in the deck.
Does it not?
I don't think...
Yeah.
Oh, they are playing Firefly. Oh,
oh no, sorry, that's Russian Federation's list. No.
Yeah.
Russian Federation do, Kazakhstan do not play Firefly. But this quest is looking like it will be complete.
Oh yeah, even then, Shaw was a 4/7. Surely that had to be better than flanking strike on the previous turn. That's so much scarier of a minion.
The downside is, though, then the potential of Glacial Shard, prep, Vanish, they get the Novice Engineer back as well.
Oh, are you really going to make a play around Glacial Shard, prep, Vanish?
Or even plays around Shadow Step, right? Because KG doesn't know the context of Renman's hand. Maybe playing multiple copies of that same Novice Engineer ends up being the best thing for them.
That's true.
They just don't want to give Renman the possibility of bouncing anything. You're right. People shouldn't be specifically playing around Glacial Shard, prep, Vanish.
Yeah. But now still from Kazakhstan, it's ended up being very slow plays that are vulnerable to turns like this. And even then, like on that turn, we could have seen, instead of Houndmaster Shaw, which is vulnerable to Sap and Glacial Shard, Egg, Coin, Terra Scale Stalker, and then on the next turn you go Mossy Horror to destroy your own egg. You're obviously leaving yourself kind of vulnerable to Vanish, but when are you ever not vulnerable to Vanish with this deck? Like, if you're making all your plays to be as least vulnerable to Vanish as possible, I just don't think that's optimistic enough. And I guess from the fact that your opponent hasn't gone for anything like Sonya into Boar, or bounced back a Glacial Shard a whole bunch of times yet, you maybe do put them on exactly Vanish, because their hand clearly isn't doing much at the moment. But even then, for Kazakhstan, I maybe would have liked to seen slightly more aggressive lines of play here, because that's how you want the deck to function. You want it to be like a more old-school Hunter, where you just dominate them on the board.
I wonder what Renman is holding back these shards and the Vanish for, though. Like, just sapping the Houndmaster Shaw instead.
I mean, just going for a more powerful turn. He wants Q play dead to come down. Like, he wants to bait out the power turn from his opponent. Or just this. Now that the high main's there, he doesn't have to go for prep vanish on this turn necessarily, because he doesn't actually have any more bounce effect to get that one extra activation for 5 plays of the Glacial Shard.
Okay, there are 8 cards. I was counting how many cards in Kazakhstan's hand there, because if there were 9 cards, then the Savannah Jaime would be strong.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Some of the 2/2s, so it's actually quite important. Yeah. You could definitely argue that to play around Vanish, the hunter wants to keep his hand too full so that the Death Rattles get destroyed rather than sapped. Which is quite an interesting little talking point there.
Yeah, it is true.
As now we have 2 shards out of 5. Russian Federation are looking for 1 more bounce, and then this Scale Hide becomes a 2-mana 4/4 with Lifesteal and Rush.
And it looks to me like they're gearing up to play the Vicious Scale Hide, but I've got to be honest, I'm not really sure what that does for your game plan here. I think the main fear here for Russian Federation is that they don't have enough stuff to do after they've completed the quest. Right. They have no draw in hand. They don't even have the ability to complete the quest at the moment. So I think I much prefer here attacking face and re-daggering, because if you get a 1/3 onto the board, so what? They play a 3/3 or a 3/6 or something bigger that just value trades into it.
Well, they know that Howmaster Shore has, the KG has the Howmaster Shore and has the 3-mana 3/3. So the Scale Hide would be dealt with immediately. Right. There's no question about that.
Well, whether they go for that play is the next thing, because that's not a particularly powerful turn.
Could be dealt with.
Could be dealt with, yeah.
Like, they have the option to do that. As we can see, there's also Mossy Horror in the hand.
Sure.
But it's, it's in the deck. It's something to think about. Russian Federation just need to draw more cards. They need to get a bounce effect of some description. And, they have plenty in the Quest Rogue deck. We're talking Brewmasters, we're talking Shadow Steps, another Vanish, Zola the Gorgon, Sonya that you mentioned right at the beginning. Any of these cards would have allowed them to complete the quest by now.
A whole plethora of options available to Renmen, but he's just got to find them. And for the moment, while KG definitely is not doing anything to advance his own game plan quite yet, or his own win condition, they're getting a very dominating board presence and plowing everything through to the face. It's still not bad for the moment. He's not really under all too much pressure, because there is not that final bounce effect available to Russian Federation.
I was so ready for Coin, Katharina, King Crush, bam.
I was definitely worth considering, but I think now that you've seen... as Sonya is picked up.
Quest complete.
Now that you've seen Vanish come down, you want to go as wide as possible, because you know that there's 2 Glacial Shards in hand. So even if you go Coin Katharina, they just freeze both the things that come out.
Sure, yeah.
And they probably bounce the Glacial Shard, and they probably complete the quest.
So many
That's true.
options.
But now, because of the Sonya pickup, Russian Federation can just complete the quest single-handedly with the Stone Tusk Boar.
That's true. Whilst also killing off the 5/5?
Yes. Alternatively, they could go with the Scale Hide. They can't complete the quest this turn, but they end up with the 1-mana version of it in their hand for next turn.
Well, they can't complete the quest no matter what this turn. Like, they can't play it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
They can finish it.
Okay, yeah.
The difference, if they go with the Scale Hide, the only way to deal with the 5/5 is by putting the weapon in anyway, so all of the healing they get, they're going to counteract. So
I like this.
I think it just makes more sense to go with the Boar.
I agree. And this has worked out pretty nicely for Russian Federation, because what it gives them the ability to do is save these Glacial Shards for more impactful targets. Like, freezing a Devil Sword is obviously pretty good, but it's not that good. You want to be freezing High Mains, Katharina, King Crush, all that kind of good stuff to make sure definitively that you're not dying. And also it just gives them a whole bunch of extra stuff to play. A Stone Tusk Boar, still 2 shards in hand. They're now in a position where they're not actually running out of stuff to do anytime soon.
I was sort of wondering that turn about the potential of finishing the Devil Sword with the dagger and then freezing the 3/3 to try and protect Sonya. But obviously, as KG still knows that Howmaster Shore is in hand, it's very unlikely that this Sonya ever survives until next turn, regardless of what happens. So I think it was just better to do as Russian Federation did. Trade that Boar in repeatedly, and next turn, things are going to start to swing in their favor.
However, Kazakhstan can make some mighty powerful plays on this turn. We could see Terrascale Coin Mossy Horror, which gives you the ability to get 2 5/5s on the board, 2 3/3s, a 2/7, and kill off your opponent's Sonya, whilst also connecting that Terrascale to face. That looks like a pretty blooming powerful turn to me.
Yep, I can't argue with that. I mean, just dropping Howmaster Shore as well preemptively could be an option. dropping another minion, dropping the Terra Scale as well, giving it rush, so trading the Terra Scale into Sonya, going face with the 3-3, still developing an extra 5-5. There are plenty of different ways Kazakhstan can do with it.
You just want to go super wide right now. Like, I think that's the only thing you really need to be worrying about here, because you know they have freeze effects, but they're very unlikely to have a second Vanish at this point. Oh, and this is also buffed by the... Oh, they're both buffed by Kazahstan. So this player I mentioned looks even better to me in this scenario, with obviously the buff as well. Completely destroying the 2 perfect minions that you'd want to. And now, KG is basically just saying, freeze this.
Yeah. I mean, Musty Horror is actually a pretty terrifying card with the 3-8 stat line, because with that much health, it actually becomes quite a menace. As Belarus versus Ukraine go 1-on-1. Belarus evening the score.
So Russian Federation obviously have to be factoring a prep into this turn, whether it's on the Crystal Core or Mimic Pod makes no difference really. But at the moment, this is basically a little bit too scary of a board. You need to find something more impressive than this to be able to finish off the game.
Would more charges be any good here? We're starting to... Oh!
Oh! Wow!
All right, yep.
Really good!
Fine. Okay, so 9 mana, take no damage next turn.
Yeah.
And then start to do some pretty crazy stuff.
Okay, so obviously this is very flashy and it looks good at first glance, and I think it's probably still the right play because they were just taking so much damage with every alternative. There are a lot of downsides though. You still have to play a 5-mana Crystal Core next turn, which is half your mana done already. Your opponent can load up on the board massively and you have no Vanish. This has always been the downside of Valera, is unless you have Vanish to punish them for developing on the board, they just make the next turn even more threatening. It's just delaying the problem. So the bet...
Give me the cute play, Derek. Come on. Give me the play.
The cute play?
Or the play that you're describing. Oh, you're just talking about Valera?
Yeah, I'm just talking about Valera, sorry, yeah.
I thought I was getting excited. I thought something for next turn was coming up.
No, I mean, all it is their turn next play that they get off of the upgraded Valera hero power has to be good enough to make up for it. Which, you know,
ideally they draw Vanish, right? The second copy.
Yeah. Vanish would be... Vanish is the perfect card.
But it's going to be something like 3 Glacial Shards and a Charger.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine. Like
maybe double lifesteal. Acceptable. Howmaster Shore is going to cause some issues though. That cube is also going to cause some problems.
But it has to be good enough to be an extra, 3 damage that was added to the board. So I guess that's not actually that much more threatening than what you were facing down anyway in this scenario. It's more resilient, but it's not necessarily more damage.
What a puzzle in the Russian Federation's hand at the moment that they have to try and piece together.
I mean, they could just play the second Valera the Hollow and try and get Vanish, if that's their only
That's
out.
not a bad call, actually. It means that Kazakhstan are just going to put more stuff on the board next turn.
Well, they can't really develop much more than this. Like, if you're going for Valera the Hollow here, your only out at that point is getting the Vanish. So I think they've calculated here, you know, so what? We can still survive on this turn by playing 3 Glacial Shards, massively stodges up what the opponent is trying to do. And then outside of that, you go for Terra Scale Stalker to heal back up as well. It's a very strong push onto the board here.
Would you rather have 2 copies of Terra Scale Stalker or an extra copy of Glacial Shard? That's where it gets a little complicated for me.
Do you mean Vicious Scale Hides?
Sorry, Vicious Scale Hides. Because you could double trade the Vicious Scale Hides into Hellmaster Shore. Gain 8 and prevent all of the rushing going on in the future, but then that's the rest of the mana used up. So it's... Now, freezing more targets has to be better.
No, they disagree. You gain more health this way, and Rush could be pretty good here, but... I don't know. How... Actually, no, yeah, I guess Rush is actually very good. You'd be able to completely destroy the Renman's board. 16
damage still remaining, or 18 damage with the hero power remaining to go face, and wow, Spirit Singer Umbra. That's a threat that has to be dealt with immediately by Renman.
Yeah, and it still feels to me like Wily has bought himself another turn here, can also gain a whole bunch more health off of these pesky Lord Vicious Scale Hides. Still, Vanish is pretty much what he's looking for if he wants to really lock out this game, because still, Kazakhstan are in a good position, and they are showing no signs of slowing. Katharina Winterwisp ready to come down, rip a minion straight out the deck.
King Crush, specifically.
Is it only King Crush?
It does run King Crush. No, it's not Witchwood Grizzlies.
Stranglethorn Tiger?
Yeah, that's...
Oh, Witchwood Grizzly?
Yep.
King Crush himself?
Could be any of those
Plenty of options, yeah.
King Crush is the best.
Agreed. Even then though, a 6/6 Tiger, untargetable, so unfreezable on this turn, looks very strong indeed. And as we mentioned, Russian Federation still with the ability to buy themselves an extra turn towards that Vanish if they want to with Valera the Hollow. If that's their only out here, then fine. Buy yourself another turn and get yourself closer to that Vanish.
So with the remaining Glacial Shard, they can freeze Katharina and I guess the Cube. That leaves 70, 9, 20 damage on the board, I think.
Really?
Including the hero power.
Death's
8
shadow
and
grows.
9. I think it's, yeah, you're right, with the weapon it's 20.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you're pretty much very likely still alive then. There's pretty much no burst damage in the Hunter deck, really.
Apart from King Crush.
King Crush itself.
Death's
Yeah.
shadow.
And the fact that it wasn't summoned from Katharina means that it is possible that it's in the
Yeah,
hand.
I mean, the thing is, even if you are dead to King Crush, you've got to take those risks.
They could get a Brewmaster from this, potentially playing the Shard this turn. Or Solar, that works too.
No, you wouldn't have to. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you were just about...
Drink with me, friend.
Oh, and also they can play the Boar as well
Yeah.
if they're really scared of King Crush. Completely play around it.
Well, not even if they're really scared of King Crush, just to dominate the board as much as possible in the immediate.
This is a lot of 4/4s actually.
Oh,
Whoa, they're going
face!
face!
I mean, they've realized, what, with 12 damage, King Crush would be 9 extra damage,
Oh yeah, they can't fit in the hero
21.
power, can
They can't fit in the hero power. So they would be exactly 1 damage off lethal with King Crush off the top, I think.
Yeah, tracking does give Paige the opportunity to get it, but like you said, 1 off lethal and lethal are 2 different things.
Exactly, they're very, very different things.
Witchwood Grizzly must be worth considering here, as it would be a 4/10 with Taunt. And there's a lot of 4/4s on the board. And Russian Federation starting to take the aggressive side of things here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much got to be Witchwood Grizzly here. With them going face, you really have to be afraid of what trick have they got up their sleeve. Is it double deckhand, Zola into double board? There's all kinds of nonsense that you can push forward to face.
Yeah, with Deathstalker Rexel, which does allow the Terror Scale and the Mossy Horror to trade into some of these 4/4s.
That's true, and it gains you a bunch of health. So I guess overall you're gaining more health with this method anyway.
And the potential of silly bloatback combo cards.
Very true.
More ways of clearing the board. Bigger beast, bigger Taunt. Oh, look, there's King Crush. Kazakhstan going to carefully remove the Glacial Shard and the minions
And
that have charged
Right.
specifically.
Almost forgot about the Tiger there with the ability to trade into the board, because that's a very important distinction. That could have been a pretty punishing turn if they'd left that up. But now with a Vicious Scalehides ready to come down, there could be just two Vicious Scalehides played this turn. I don't believe there's the mana for 3 to be played.
But it's not bad. It can be value traded with the 3/3. In fact, what Renman could do if he wanted to was play 1 Scalehide, value trade it with the 3/3, and then play double Solar to start the infinite value going
That's true.
whilst developing
Yeah.
for the 4/4s. The problem is, how much damage did that leave on the board? Russian Federation heal up to 27. 22, 23 damage left on the board, so King Crush would be lethal. Oh no, because the other minions on the board can trade, so it's actually fine. Gonna go this route instead.
I like this a lot. Just anything with double Scalehide feels good to me on this turn. And still, drawing those minions, getting him closer to damage cards like South Sea Deckhand, because he still kept that dagger intact for when he wants to go face with that. Stone Tusk War and South Sea Deckhand, now it's got to the point where Vanish won't be saving him from his opponent's damage, it'll just be delivering lethal.
Yeah, where is that Vanish, actually?
It's pretty low down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Scalehide to put Russian Federation back up to 30. These are just going face.
Oh yes, this is absolutely the time to start sending everything you can to his face. And I think if the Vicious Scalehide had charged, they would have just sent everything to the face in that scenario, because they're really not afraid of dying in the immediate. They just want to kill their opponent as quick as they can. And now Kazakhstan have to just, trade everything they can. Hunter's Mark, or even just the Candle Shot on its own, allows them to clear up a very nice amount of the board.
It does.
But they're not out of the woods by any means.
No, in fact, the Hunter, the longer this game goes, the further into the woods the Hunter seems to be. King Crush could be played here just to trade with something.
Yep.
What's it actually weak to?
You've seen both Glacial Shards. Same as everything else, just Vanish, or just dying. Like, that's really what it's weak to at that instance. As a self-Hunter's Mark here to pull out the
beautiful.
Witchwood Grizzly. Very, very cute play indeed.
Oh, the Savannah.
Oh, the high main. That's quite a lot worse for you, I think, here. Like, you already have plenty of attack on the board.
Okay. 18 health remaining. 2 boars, 1 deckhand, 1 Zola, and a Shadow Step as well.
Is that just it? They've got, what, 4 damage?
It is. Yeah, that is just it. As long as they've got the mana to play the Zola.
Right.
Russian Federation actually just take this game. They were living on the knife edge there for a long period of time. But they did it.
That was absolutely beautifully played from Federation, just showing absolutely no sign of cowering in the face of such insane damage. Like, the board that the Hunter has been this powerful for like the whole game.
Yeah.
And yet somehow, even with just 4/4 minions, Redmen not going for the Valera when he thought his only out would be Vanish. He was not cowed into those plays.
Yeah.
Instead, he was making those risky plays that gave him such a good chance of pulling things back. So really beautiful Quest Rogue play there.
They weren't even freezing the board over and over again. Like, they got a
They were
good
going aggressive.
They got a good 4 or 5 glacial shards in total.
Yeah.
But it did get to the point where yeah, exactly. They were aggressive. That was the only way of dealing with the minions, was trading into them. They couldn't stall, they couldn't sap, they couldn't vanish,
Yeah.
they couldn't glacial shard anymore. They took the offensive and it worked. And that was an awesome game of Hearthstone.
It really was. And even that point where they put themselves in a position where they were 1 off dying from a King Crush off the top. Like, even a buffed King Crush from the Keller set. It was really perfectly positioned play there that really shows they know that deck in and out.
Oh, what a series we just witnessed. And not a great series, unfortunately, for poor Kazakhstan, who now go 1-2 in the Hearthstone Global Games Swiss after losing 0-3 here. Let's take another look at the series that just happened. And there you go. 3 games, 3 wins for the Russian Federation.
That's right, even after an unfortunate regame for Stanudachi when they were looking even more dominant in the first try of that game, still just showing it's going to be such a nice matchup against the Elemental Mage. It's just not strong enough of a deck to fight back against the Priest.
All right, it sounds like we are going to have the pleasure of having a chat with Russian Federation player Stan Udachi. Stan Udachi, I can't see you. Can you hear me? Are you there? Stan Udachi isn't there. That is just a
That's not him.
That's not him. I did just see Stan Udachi. He didn't quite look like that.
Yeah, a little bit different.
A little bit different. So hopefully we'll have a chat with him again in a moment. But in the meantime, let's take a look at some highlights from the series that we just watched. Or wait, no, maybe we are having an interview. No, we're going to go for the highlights. Okay, cool. Way back in game number 1, it was the Aggro Mage versus the Breakfast-ish
Egg Priest. Yeah, it was a very, very cool deck, and I liked a lot what I saw from Kazakhstan, at least in terms of how fun it looked, but it did not look particularly powerful. Just once all the minions were cleared off, the buff cards really were incredibly underwhelming. And they're here once again, the second game, the Elemental Mage for Kazakhstan, and Neyman, a very strong player indeed. Would not be expecting him to bring such a kind of weird and wacky deck such as this one, but clearly here just showing it cannot fight back against the tier 1 decks like Control Priest.
You sort of imagine Neyman to be one of the more serious players in the Hearthstone scene as well, but he spent most of that game with a little smirk on his face.
Yeah.
Like he knew, yeah, this is a bit of a silly deck, but you know what? It can win, and unfortunately on this occasion it did not. Then finally there was this masterpiece of Miracle Row gameplay by Renman.
Quest Rogue.
What is wrong with me today? I cannot name the right
So
card
close,
once.
mate. So close.
Okay, masterful Quest Rogue gameplay from Renman.
Yeah, liked a lot what I saw from him there. Just never being, it was brave play, I want to call it, where he was never letting himself have too much fear put into him into making unoptimal plays. Always playing aggressively, sneaking in the damage to face wherever he could, giving himself the outs for lethal with the Shadow Step, and when he got it, he was rewarded.
It just shows again why Quest Rogue has always been such a good deck. Just having a full board of whether it's 5/5s or 4/4s.
Yeah.
Once these things with charge start to go face and get bounced, dealing, well, I mean, it was 18 damage to the face lethal that game, as you can see right there with that Shadow Step pickup. Redmond looking very excited as soon as he saw the card. Like, yep, this is it. We've just won the game. And yeah, that was the end of the game and the end of the series.
Very beautifully played as well. Even at the end, like we were talking about infinite Zola Valera combos where you can just infinitely copy your own Valera with the new upgraded hero power. But that wasn't even necessary. They realized it was going to be through damage that they were winning this game, and so they did, capitalizing on Hunter's low amount of healing outside of the Rexar hero power.
It was very interesting, though, that they still had the Valyria in their hand right at the end there, because if a turn ever did pop up where it's like, okay, they will just lose if they don't Valyria, then they would have still had the option to do that and potentially get Vanish and then continue the game from there. But the fact they didn't have to was very cool indeed. Right, we're going to try again with Stan Udachi. Stan, congratulations on your victory against Kazakhstan. First thing I want to ask you guys is, what did you think when you first saw Kazakhstan's deck lists?
Hello, thank you. Yes, we when we saw the decks, it was a little bit strange. With decks so extravagant for this week, but I don't think Priest was good for A. But Mage probably strong deck. So we're happy about our win for sure, but at the same time, a little bit sad because we beat our friendly country.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Our friends.
But did you feel confident coming into this series? Did you feel like you were favored when you saw the deck lists?
Yes, but it was anyway a bit scary because it's unknown decks.
Sure.
Nobody played versus it, right?
I wanted to ask you, after playing through that series, do you think that that is a good strategy to go for where they went, where it's weird decks that no one's going to have played against and they may make misplays against? Or do you think it's better to go for what most people are doing here, of just bringing the kind of tier 1 and 2 decks for each class?
Interesting question. I'm sure probably some mix of both strategies is good. If you bring some decks that nobody played, you should a lot of testing with stuff, right? Before you do it. So not just pick some decks before Ogre or something, right? You should a lot of testing.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's going to be particularly difficult, I think, for the next week of the Hearthstone Global Games when the expansion comes out. Have you guys come up with a plan for how you're going to prepare for that?
Next week, for sure, with new expansion, it will be much more interesting. It will be not War of Clones. But yes, we will prepare together, try to build something new, for sure.
Awesome. Well, congratulations one more time, Stan Udachi. Congratulations to your team. Go and enjoy it. We will see you again next week.
Thank you.
Or next time, I should say. It's not actually next week.
Yeah, a couple-week break.
Taking a few weeks off for the Hearthstone Global Games for the expansion to break in. And then we'll be back when the teams are ready with all of their new decks, etc. But yeah, great series. Russian Federation performing as well as we'd expect them to.
That's right, but we're going to take a quick look now at the results from today's matches, I believe, as that was the final series of the day on stream, as we saw some more polarized matches than we are used to, I believe, in the global games. A couple of 3-0 victories towards the end of the day for my pick, which I'm very happy about in Germany. But some very good games all around, I think we could say. Yeah,
I mean, the only real surprise, and I'm really sorry, the only real surprise I can see there is United Kingdom taking down Sweden 3-1. Sweden, with, I mean, specifically both Boston and Orange, two members of the Dusky Boys, you'd expect that to be one of the kingpin teams in the Hearthstone Global Games, but Sweden didn't perform that well last year either, being eliminated in the first phase of the tournament, and unfortunately United Kingdom have dropped them down to 1 win, 2 losses. As we look at the off-stream games, Belarus versus Ukraine are not finished yet. We'll have to update you on that score tomorrow. Belarus currently winning 2-1 though.
Wow.
But that is a match that their Swiss score is 2-0 at the moment. So the winner of that series is really leading the charge in the Hearthstone Global Games.
That's right. And Belarus, if they were to take that against Ukraine, second place last year they got in the Global Games, would be a fantastic victory for them. I'm sure they'd be very excited indeed, because that's one of my favorite things about the Global Games, is when the lesser known teams, arguably the less skilled teams, take down these real giants. They just have to feel so good. You see these crazy celebrations, and it's always very heartwarming to see.
Right. I believe we have the standings to look at now and how they have been affected from today's games. China, the only team in the tournament so far, sitting on 3-0. They will be joined by either Belarus or Ukraine within the next hour. But at the moment, they are the #1 team at 3-0.
And I think while maybe they wouldn't be most people's choice of what they would have predicted to be at 3-0, even then I think they can hold their heads high because they played some very nice Hearthstone today indeed. But then for some of the other teams kind of hovering around the middle of the road mark, like Germany, UK, and South Korea, getting that 2-1 victory to bump them up a little bit has got to feel fantastic.
It's a big deal. Though, as you can see on the right there are still many, many teams yet to play. And again, tomorrow, USA versus Turkey. That's going to be one of the big ones, as one of those two teams will be eliminated from the Hearthstone Global Games, so everything to play for then. Speaking of USA versus Turkey, why don't we take a look at tomorrow's schedule and see which games we have coming up. France versus Thailand, Italy versus Spain, Turkey, United States, Austria, wrong one, versus Mexico, and finally the current Hearthstone Global Games champions, the Czech Republic versus Romania. Derek, are there any big games you're looking forward to from tomorrow?
So obviously, as you highlighted, potentially United States elimination match is definitely going to be one to look out for. But even then, for me, Italy versus Spain is a really interesting one because Spain is one of those European teams which has consistently had pretty decent members coming out of there, but very few of the absolute top of Hearthstone play, the absolute real elite. And it feels to me like Italy is kind of coming up and joining them in that spot where they're on the rise, getting some of those stronger players like Turner and Poulet that we see on the Italian team. It should be a good match to see who's coming up as one of the kings of Europe.
Yep, I'm particularly excited for Italy versus Spain as well. We will be actually casting that one.
Right.
Derek and Lorinda will be starting the day. Sorry, Derek and Lorinda? I'm even getting your names wrong now. What on earth is going wrong? Anyways, let's take a look at the caster prediction result. This is something that will cheer me up a little bit. Let's take a look at the caster prediction results. There you go. 4-1 for the two of us.
Oh, I beg your pardon there, Mr. Falcone. 4-1 for the two of us.
Do you know what? I just can't today. I can't read. Like, I don't
get
know
back
things.
down to 3-1 where you belong.
Tomorrow I'm going to be 4-1, so it's absolute. No, tomorrow I'm going to be 5-1.
Really?
Once Italy and Netherlands have both won their games.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Look, Gaskin is also a dad. We have the same name. What do you want from me?
Better casting.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, that has been us finished for today's Hearthstone Global Games. But from Derek, from Dan Gaskin, from Lorinda, and from myself, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 4 p.m. CEST. See you then.